and so are you. And that's a bit of what we're talking about this morning. First of all, I want to thank Reverend Madeline and Reverend Lanny for taking good care of our community in my absence. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so our theme this month is the journey of becoming. And interestingly enough, the talk title for this morning is The Gift of a New Journey. And it's been this mental twisting wrestling match for me, because when it comes right down to it, there's just one journey. It's the journey of becoming. And so how do we get a new journey? If there's only one journey, where is there ever a new one, right? So the context for the month is that while it often feels like a journey comes to an end in this human realm, what we're really dealing with is cycles. What we're really dealing with are cycles that seem to come to an end, but really just go back into another iteration of the cycle. And we call that evolution. But evolution is never a new evolution, because it always contains everything that has come before it. And for something to be completely new, it would need to not contain anything that happened before it. And I'm pretty sure that's not possible. I mean, I'm looking at this new little life over here, Miss Rosalina, and she didn't come out of nothing. She came out of two people that were here before, and yet she is quite new in and of herself. And so I think part of what we're called to do today is to really look at newness as a new layer, a new evolution, without sacrificing, without negating anything that has come before it. And that's challenging for us in this human realm. The timeless wisdom that we're working with this morning is life is infinite, eternal, forever expanding. So if life is infinite, that means we can't really add anything to it. It's already infinite. It's already immeasurable. Right? If it's eternal, that means anything that has ever happened is still happening. It can't be eliminated. In eternality, there is no end. Right? So the amoebas, everything that existed before the Big Bang, in fact, the unformed everything, still exists. Infinite possibility is still very much right here, right now. It didn't go anywhere just because things evolved in form. But sometimes we get stuck in the form and in the limitation of what we see and forget that infinite possibility is still infinite possibility. Hasn't gone anywhere. When we think about where we are now, I think the hardest part for most of us, if not all of us, is this protracted grief that we're in of letting go of what was 2 years ago. And this pull to go back to that rather than to embrace the cycles of creation, that perhaps some of what was happening, perhaps a lot of what was happening 2 years ago no longer serve us. And that they serve us best as a foundation to build upon rather than something to go back to, right? We all came out of the unformed. We all came out of amoebas, right? That evolved into even more form. And so clearly there is this idea of building upon, right? The amoebas haven't gone anywhere. They still exist. They just expanded into new forms. So I think here's the trick, and this is probably my favorite spiritual principle. Principle is never bound by precedent. You say that again. Principle is never bound by precedent. So what does that mean? That means that the activity of infinite possibility is not bound by anything that has happened before. Right? The way we get to heal is because we're not bound by our mistakes. Thank God. Because I don't know about you, but I've made a few. I'm coming up on 39 years of being clean and sober, living without drugs and alcohol. And see, it's weird to me that anybody claps for that. I gotta tell you, it's weird, because it's just doing what really I should have been doing all along, but for whatever reason, couldn't. And then when I could, I wouldn't, if I'm telling the absolute truth, right? But thank goodness that principle is not bound by precedent, because the precedent in my life was ugly. The precedent in my life was to commit a slow suicide and take as many people with me as I could. Right? I mean, it was not pretty, but I'm not bound by that, because infinite possibility says I get to change. And you get to change too. And the whole world gets to change. And whether we agree with it or not, it is changing. Viruses clearly get to change, because they do. They don't really, I don't know if you've noticed, but they're not asking our permission to mutate. They're just doing what they do. Principle is not bound by precedent. Evolution is going to happen. It is happening even now as I'm speaking. And we get to choose whether we're going to participate mindfully or not. And don't you worry about any noise that child is making. That's God chatting over there. It's all good. So here's the thing. A couple of quotes that I want to anchor in and talk about. Ernest Holmes said this: "Nature will not let us stay in one place too long. She will let us stay just long enough to gather the experience necessary to the unfolding and advancement of the soul." So perhaps everything that's happening is natural law, is nature moving us forward. But this quote gives me pause, because it says, well, if nature's moving us forward, then we have the necessary and experience for the unfoldment and advancement of the soul, because that's when she moves us. The problem is we're not all in agreement with that. There's a lot of us that think we don't know what we need to know yet. And I submit to you that mostly that's because we're trying to not move. We're trying to go back. We're trying to recreate what is gone. Right? Principle is not bound by precedent. What will it look like if we let go of that? What will it look like if we allow ourselves to grieve a society that we thought existed, to grieve relationships that we thought existed in a certain way that don't exist that way anymore? What if we allowed ourselves to grieve the collective loss of life? I think it's in the millions at this point, of lives that have transitioned off the planet. I can't say it wasn't their time to go. I can't say it was. I can say it's enormous to experience that in this human form because we're just not used to that kind of volume. But what if we embraced it as life unfolding itself? It's our judgments that get in our way. Ernest Holmes also said this: all laws are universal and may become individualized. The thing that stands between you and the greater good is a thing of thought and nothing else. It is not reality that you must change, but your mental reaction to it. Okay. I don't have the quote here, but my favorite Ernest Holmes quote: many of us think our thoughts create reality. This has never been true. Thinking the world was flat never made the world flat. It simply made our experience of it flat. Okay. Reality in this teaching is that infinite possibility. Reality is that there is one unformed substance that emanates itself into form. That's reality. Reality is the wholeness, that no matter what's happening in this physical realm, it is whole, perfect, and complete. And each of us is whole, perfect, and complete. It's only our thought processes that get stuck in the form that make us feel less complete, that make us feel separate, that make us feel lacking. And Emma Curtis Hopkins, if you haven't studied Emma, I highly recommend. Emma Curtis Hopkins is like that. There's a reason she was called the teacher's teacher, because she was no nonsense. If it's so, I said it. If I said it, it's so because I said it, and I said it because it's so. You know, she would listen to your story and then tell you, don't ever tell that story again. You're done. Right? So this is what Emma Curtis Hopkins has to tell us this morning. The world will persist in exhibiting before you what you persist in affirming the world is. Let me say that again. Thank you, Emma. The world will persist in exhibiting before you what you persist in affirming the world is. So if you continue to affirm that the world is a broken place filled with mean, evil people, you're going to experience a broken world filled with mean people. It doesn't mean there aren't good people here. It doesn't mean, now I want to be really careful here because I know some of you will take that and run in a different direction. I didn't say evil behavior doesn't happen. That's not what I said. Behaviors are hurtful. People are emanations of God. Our thinking shows up as behavior, which is easily correctable. What do we teach? Change your thinking, change your life. Where we get stuck, if we want to get really honest, is I would much rather focus on your behavior and use my thoughts to change you than my thoughts to change me. Because it's your fault I'm acting the way I'm acting. See, if you just get your act together, then I'd get my act together because I'm reacting to your actions, so it's really not my fault. Really. You just clean up your act. You know, if, you know, the Republicans, if the Democrats would just clean up their act, the world would be fine. The Democrats, if the Republicans would just clean up their world, everything would be just fine. The progressives want both sides to change. Great. Here's what my invitation to you this morning is. What do you need to change? What do you want to see? Where's the world that you want to experience? Because the only thing stopping you is affirming that the world is different than what you want. The only thing stopping you is blaming everyone else for your experience. Okay? Life happens. You know, I wanted to get a lot more sleep than I got last night. I really did. I didn't want to wake up every hour and a half and deal with a dog that was throwing up everywhere around the house. But that's what unfolded. So I had two choices. I could be mad. I could act like, a 62-year-old spoiled child who had been infringed upon by this little fur baby. Or I could get up, be a daddy, take care of him, and do whatever needs to be done. And, like they told me in ministerial school, you can sleep when you're dead. But how do we show up? How do we react? How do we react when people do things that harm us in this human realm? If we react with retaliation, are we not also engaging in harmful behavior? But see, we get this self-righteous indignation thing going where it's okay if I harm you back. But it wasn't okay that you harmed me first. Harm is harm, people. Doesn't matter who went first. About the only time that really matters is in dominoes, and typically whoever goes first wins. Okay? So somebody does something that is hurtful. Doesn't mean you ignore their behavior, doesn't mean we co-sign the behavior, but you get to choose how you show up in response or reaction. You get to choose, do you show up lovingly, or do you show up in retaliation, engaging in the same behavior and refusing to admit it? 3 questions, 3 things to explore this week. In what areas of your life are you carrying an old paradigm that no longer serves you? Because really all of this is about letting go of what doesn't work anymore. Changing our beliefs. So what are you holding on to? What belief are you holding on to that doesn't serve you anymore? And then imagine what would be possible in your life if you could go back and make a different decision. Because you actually can. You can't go back and relive the moment, but you can go back and change your decision about how you're experiencing your past and the decisions that you made. And when you do that, it's called forgiveness, and it's called freedom. You have to let yourself off the hook for decisions that didn't pan out quite the way you wanted, but you get to change your experience with your past. And then what changes? What new perspectives might be available to you that will empower you to express the gift of you? That's what's available. And I will share this. It is never too late. I want to wrap up with this. One of the things that vacations are really good for is spending time with oneself. And as much healing as I have done over the years, there's still some stuff in there. There's still some self-hatred for decisions that I wish I had made differently. And so I have hired a coach. I have hired a spiritual coach to walk me through another level of healing. And I encourage you to really embrace full circle that the role of community is to help us do that. None of us is meant to do this journey alone. And so connect with one another. Give up the lie that you cannot connect with each other over the phone, that you cannot connect with each other over Zoom. You made it up. And as long as that, as Emma says, as long as you persist in that belief, that will be your experience. And the minute you decide that, oh, I can connect through these things in this weirdness time, then you will connect with one another. Take a class, hire a practitioner, sit with a friend, invite Piglet and Pooh to your stick house. Whatever needs to happen. But help one another, support one another, be vulnerable with one another, because that's when we heal, is when we're willing to be vulnerable. Let's take this into prayer. And so I just lean into, again, this awareness that there's only one thing happening here. The divine emanating itself, the divine expressing itself in the multiplicity of form. That we are about becoming aware that there is one journey. We are it. I speak my word, claiming and affirming that every path is that path returning to the awareness of the magnificence of the unformed in form. It's a letting go of anything unlike that and stepping into everything that we came here to be. I speak a word of courage, a word of tenderness, a word of embrace for all of humanity in this time of shift, in this time of recreation, in this time of renewal, in this time of letting go what no longer serves and opening to a new expression. Grateful to know that it's already done and that we simply say yes to being conscious, to being intentional in the unfolding of the journey of becoming one, all engaged as one. And so with deep gratitude, I release and let it go. Invite you to join me as we say together, and so it is.